the covenant statement of the Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Port Townsend, Washington, where I served my ministerial internship nearly a decade ago, reads in part, "We are travelers. We meet for a moment in this sacred place to love, to share, to serve." We are travelers. I think that's a pretty good description of many Unitarian Universalist congregations. For we are, as a people, we are travelers. We are pilgrims. We are seekers of truth, seekers of meaning, seekers of knowledge, and seekers of often elusive answers about the deep meanings of life. And we have chosen to travel together on our journey of seeking and exploration. Now, a member of that same Quimper congregation in Port Townsend offered a summary of the common thread of Unitarian Universalism when he said, "We share a belief in something that is larger than ourselves." Something that is larger than ourselves. Now, for some, that something is all humanity. For the others, it's all life, that grand and amazing interdependent web. Some of us believe in a divine power. That power might be expressed as God or gods or a goddess or goddesses. Or perhaps as the powerful mystery we sometimes call the spirit of life. Now, some sit in quiet contemplation as a way of seeking to feel closer to something greater than oneself. Some study deeply. We are not so much the people of the book, we are people of the books. Lots and lots of books. Some walk or jog or run or swim or dance. Some sing. Now, one of the fringe benefits of being a retired minister is I get to join with these people in the chalice up on the chancel with me today, to join in the amazing spiritual practice that music can be and is. Now, the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism calls for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. A search for truth. A search for meaning. And we search with intention because we're not into this to be merely spiritual tourists. We are seekers, deeply curious seekers. Such seeking is a central part of what it means to be fully human. The 20th century Unitarian Universalist minister and theologian Forrest Church wrote that religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. We're not the animals with advanced language or tools as much as we are the religious animal. Knowing that we must die, we question what life means. The answers, he continues, we arrive at may not be religious answers, but the questions death forces us to ask are at heart religious questions. Where do I come from? Who am I? Where am I going? What is life's purpose? What does it all mean? Now, such questions, Church tells us, are religious questions. And we seek a religious community like this one as a place to explore them and as a people to join us in our explorations. Now, Unitarian Universalism can be a kind of laboratory of faith, if you will. For it's a place set up for us to explore. And we don't have beakers and Bunsen burners and such, but what we have is each other and a multitude of ideas and practices to use. Because we've discovered that mere scientific rational analysis cannot be too narrow to serve us well as we delve into religious questions. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? What confronts me? Or where can I turn? What comforts me when I face despair? We need these broader methodologies, broader and more diverse roadmaps on our seekers' journeys. We need not merely facts, but we need the power of metaphor to explore such questions. We need stories and we need myths to help us find our way. You know, myths, those stories that never were true, but are filled with deep truth. The sacred writings from the world's great religions are filled with such stories and myths. There's Sufi tales and Confucian stories and myths of ancient Rome and Greece, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, Celtic stories. In our culture, many have looked to Judeo-Christian teachings, what we call the Bible, as offering a roadmap. Sometimes, though, one can easily misread such maps. John Dominic Crossan, the biblical scholar and former Catholic priest, who was part of the noted Jesus seminars in the 20th century, wrote, "My point is not that those ancient people told literal stories, and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically, and we are now dumb enough to take them literally." They were and are stories, symbolic and metaphorical stories. And there are good stories in there, powerful teaching stories, that when read as the map makers and writers who created them intended them to be understood, they can be guideposts for our journey. Now, I call the Bible one of my favorite book of short stories. Bible means books, and that's what it is, a collection of books, each one of which has a unique story. And some of the books in the Hebrew Bible, the Psalms and Proverbs and the Song of Solomon, are some of the most compelling poetry of their time, poetry that has passed the test of time. Bruce Bodie, a recently retired minister of the Quimper UU Fellowship, who served as my internship supervisor, advises us to look not just at ancient writings, but also at modern poets, who he calls the truest sages of our times. Perhaps the poets are the truest sages of any time. Bruce offered classes at Quimper on Robert Frost and Mary Oliver, Robinson Jeffers, and Billy Collins, who's one of my favorite poets. If you don't know Billy Collins, check him out. He's amazing. And funny and deep. Bruce's open participatory format in those classes invited class participants to take the opportunity for a free and responsible search for poetic meaning. Today, we read and sang the poetry of E. Cummings, Wendell Berry, Albert Blanco, and before we're through, we'll add a bit of Walt Whitman. One of my favorite poets is David White, whose poem Finisterre Robin read this morning. Now, White hails originally from England, but now calls a little village of Langley, Washington on Whidbey Island his home. Until this January, Suzanne and I had lived for 6 years in Langley. Who knew? In fact, David lived a block and a half away from our co-housing community, though I have to admit I sadly never had the opportunity to meet him. You see, he was seldom home. He apparently has another home in Wales now, and he travels doing readings and serving as a corporate consultant. Yes, that's what I said, a poet who serves as a corporate consultant. David has figured out as they say, how to monetize poetry. His first book, The Heart Aroused, Poetry and the Preservation of the Soul in Corporate America, was a bestseller way beyond the world of poetry. He does workshops in corporate America and even does commission work for businesses. his poem, Working Together, which is one of my favorite poems, a great way to start a board meeting, I suggest. It was written as an ode to the Boeing 777. You see, you can't always tell, though. There is a way you can tell if he's home in Langley, though he doesn't wander about much. Because when he's home, both the Land Rover and the Mercedes convertible are in the driveway at the same time. Now, his success should in no way be considered as a reason to avoid his poetry. It is very, very good work. Yet he, like many artisans of the past, has been lucky to find patrons for his work. David goes on the road to speak and read his poems and the works of other poets in corporate settings and at retreats. The one time during our years in Langley, when he read locally, was a fundraiser for the local domestic abuse survivors program. And it sold out in a few hours. So I missed getting a ticket. I have been able to hear him read on YouTube, have purchased a couple of his books, and I follow him on Facebook, which means I get some pretty awesome posts without intending to. I recently came across a powerful TED Talk that David White had presented, and it was titled, "A Lyrical Bridge Between Past, Present, and Future." I found that he offered therein a lyrical and metaphorical path we might follow on our travels. David said, "The poet in many ways looks at what I call the conversational nature of reality. The conversational nature of reality is the fact that whatever you desire of the world, whatever you desire of your partner in marriage or in a love relationship, whatever you desire of your children, whatever you desire of the people who work with you or for you or your world, will not happen exactly as you would like it to happen. But equally, whatever the world desires of us, whatever our partner, our children, our colleague, our industry, our future demands of us, will not happen. And what actually happens is this frontier between what you think is you and what you think is not you. And this frontier of actual meaning between what we call a self and what we call the world is the only place actually where things are real. David goes on to describe what he calls 3 illusions of life. 3 illusions that can serve as roadblocks on our seeking journey. 1 is the difficulty about walking into your life, about coming into this body. Let me rephrase that. Let me begin again. One of the difficulties about walking into your life, about coming into this body, into this world fully, is you start to realize that you have manufactured 3 abiding illusions about the rest of humanity. The first illusion is that you can somehow construct a life in which you are not vulnerable. Good luck with that one, friends. You can somehow be immune to all of the difficulties and ill health and losses that humanity has been subject to since the beginning of time. The second illusion is, I can construct a life in which I will not have my heart broken. Romance is the first place you start to do it. When you're at the beginning of a new romance or a new marriage, you say, I have found the person who will not break my heart. I'm sorry, David offers. You have chosen them out unconsciously for that exact core competency. They will break your heart. Why? Because you care about them. You look at parenting. I will be the perfect mother or father. Your children will break your heart. And they don't have to do anything spectacular or dramatic, but they usually do something spectacular or dramatic to break your heart. They live with you as spies and saboteurs for years, watching your every psychological move and spotting your every weakness. And one day, when they're about 14 years old, when your back is turned because you're in the kitchen making something for them, the psychological stiletto goes in. How did you know exactly where to place it? They say, I've been watching you for a good few years. And then we hope that our armored professional personalities will prevent us from having our heart broken in work. But if you're sincere about your work, it should break your heart. You should get to thresholds where you do not know how to proceed. You do not know how to get from here to there. What does that do? It puts you in a proper relationship with reality. Why? Because you have to ask for help. You have to ask for help. Heartbreak. We don't have a choice about heartbreak. We only have a choice of having our hearts broken over people and things and projects that we deeply care about. We only have a choice of having our hearts broken over people and things and projects we deeply care about. And the last illusion David tells us is that I can somehow plan enough and arrange things that I will be able to see the path to the end from where I'm standing, right all the way to the horizon. But when you think about it, the only environment in which that would be true would be a flat desert empty of any other life. But even in a desert, the curvature of the earth would take the path away from you. So no, you see the path and then you don't, and then you see it again. So what can keep us on our path as we seek our own true north? I, like you fellow travelers gathered here this morning, have found that what makes it bearable and doable is to undertake the journey with other fellow pilgrims, other seekers, other askers of profound questions. And sometimes we step out of that community of travelers and we take time within to focus for a time more fully on the deep questions. We take private journeys, targeted pilgrimages. For me, such a pilgrim was an amazing week I spent on a mindfulness and kayaking retreat along the Alaska coast. For many in our region, it might be a long or maybe not so long walk on the Pacific Crest Trail. For some, it is the ancient path, the Camino de Santiago, the path to Santiago. David White's niece and countless other pilgrims over the century, including this congregation's own Katie Seipert, who took a sabbatical walk on the Camino last year, have taken that journey. Each traveler, even when walking alone, is surrounded by others, each in their own way, are curious to see what they may find on their way to Santiago. And so it is for each of us as we walk our journey. I'd like to close with David White's poem, Santiago. The road seen, then not seen. The hillside hiding, then revealing the way you should take. The road dropping away from you as if leaving you to walk on thin air, then catching you, holding you up when you thought you would fall. And the way forward, always in the end, the way that you came, the way that you followed, the way that carried you into your future, that brought you to this place, to this place.